Afternoon of August 18th of 2010 at approximately 3:48 p.m., officers in Northwest Philadelphia swiftly responded to a distressing radio call reporting a person with a gun at 7901 Pickering Street. Upon reaching the scene, they discovered 87-year-old George Greavves, a World War II veteran, lying face down in the bushes of his driveway, having sustained a gunshot wound to the chest. Tragically, medics pronounced George Greavves dead at 3:52 p.m. Greavves resisted during the incident, seemingly causing the robbers to leave without obtaining anything. Unfortunately, despite his efforts, Greavves could not avoid the tragic outcome of a gunshot to the chest. Approximately an hour prior to the tragic demise of George Greavves, Shirley Phillips, returning from her home healthcare job around 2:30 p.m., was strolling down Rugby Street toward the bus stop, roughly half a mile from George Greavves' home. During her walk, she encountered a female dressed in black Muslim attire and a slender young male. The female, brandishing a .22 caliber firearm, demanded her belongings. In response, Phillips dropped her purse and work bag, fleeing for her safety. It was claimed that these individuals were the same culprits involved in George Greavves' murder. After running from the scene, Shirley Phillips promptly contacted the police. On the same day, an officer and her canvassed the area for the robbers, making a stop at a nearby store named Woolston that was close to the scene of the crime. She requested permission from the clerk to search for her belongings in the trash. She also told him about her recent robbery incident. Phillips described the woman as being 25 to 30 years old, with a weight around 180 pounds. She said she was approximately a size 18, and she was darker complected and stood about 5'6". She mentioned that the male weighed around 130 pounds, had a short haircut, and a slender build. His skin tone was described as brown, and she estimated his age to be no more than 24. The clerk then informed her that he had just seen the female and male suspects, noting a teardrop tattoo on the boy's face and mentioning that a heavy-set Muslim girl had recently left. Philadelphia detectives linked the two incidents based on the similarities in the descriptions provided by witnesses regarding the suspects. After the interview with the store clerk the day of the robberies and murder, a detective familiar with a slender juvenile bearing a teardrop under his eye went to the home of 14-year-old Vaughn Combs. While Vaughn was not at home, however, his mother, Shawn Combs, was present. Detectives questioned Shawn Combs if she knew if her son, Vaughn, had anything to do with the robbery of Shirley Phillips and murder of George Greavves. She appeared highly distressed at the prospect of her son being involved in the robberies and murder. The officers escorted Shawn Combs to the police station for questioning. On the way to the police station, according to a Detective Pitts, Shawn Combs mentioned a young girl named India from the neighborhood who she said had been hanging out around her son. She said they were around the same age and that India was sneaking into her bedroom at night to steal her Kamars. 2 days after the murder, on August 20th of 2010, officers went back to the Combs residence and arrested Vaughn Combs. Along the way to the police station, he pointed to the home where he said his friend India lived. Vaughn would name India Spellman as the person who killed Greavves and robbed Shirley Phillips. That same day, on August 20th, cops arrived at India's home with guns drawn. India, her father, and grandfather were home. She was immediately arrested and handcuffed. The cops told her grandfather, who was a retired Philly police officer, and India's father they were questioning her about Vaughn and they would let her go. They said that she was not in any trouble. She didn't know why she was being put in handcuffs and demanded to have her parents around while being questioned. Unfortunately, she didn't know she was a suspect in the murder of George Greavves and the robbery of Shirley Phillips. India's father followed her to the police station since she was a minor, only 17 years old. India's mother was promptly notified of India's arrest and arrived at the police station to be present during her questioning. India's mother told detectives that India had a reading disability and had problems comprehending, and she needed to be in the room with her. Strangely, the officers prohibited her parents from entering the room. To make matters worse, detectives had relayed to her parents that she had confessed to committing a homicide and was being transferred to jail. Spellman signed a confession after being interrogated by a Detective Pitts. However, she maintained her innocence, claiming that the confession was written by the detective who interviewed her and that she was coerced into signing it. India attempted to have the confession suppressed, but the trial court denied the motion. Following her transfer to jail while awaiting trial, her family visited her, and she shared disturbing news with them. India informed her family that Detective James Pitts had allegedly slapped her in the mouth. She claimed that he promised her release to her family if she signed a statement. The family observed her swollen lip and noted that India was emotionally distraught. She also told her family she didn't know what she was signing. She signed a statement while having no understanding of what it was. India would not see her family for 12 devastating years. She was charged with firing the bullet that went into the chest of George Greavves and the robbery of Shirley Phillips. She received a sentence of 30 years to life in prison. Von Combs was sentenced to only 2 years in a juvenile facility. According to India's family, at the time of the murders, she was at home with her father and grandfather. India's grandfather said when he got home around the early afternoon of August 18th of 2010, India was in the dining room on the computer and phone, and Vaughn was there talking to her. He said he started talking to Vaughn about playing football and playing quarterback at his school. He said Vaughn didn't stay long at his house, and he came by himself. When Vaughn left, he said India stayed on her computer. He said India didn't leave out that day after Vaughn had left their home. India's father, who also was home that day, said he knows for a fact India was home between 12 and 5 p.m. on August 18th of 2010. India's father said she was on the phone and Facebook all day and even night. She was more of a homebody, and most of her friends would come to Dunkin' Donuts to see her where she worked. There was also phone records that proved she was at home from 1 to 4 p.m. the day of the murder. India had made over 30 calls and had done many texts. She was also on a 25-minute phone call from 3:33 to 3:52 p.m. with a friend. The police received a call about a gunshot around 3:48 p.m. at the Greavves residence. According to witnesses Shirley Phillips and George Greavves' neighbor, Kathy Mathis, the female suspect was dark-skinned, heavy-set, and was wearing all black Muslim clothing. These descriptions did not correspond to India Spellman. India, a light-skinned, slender high school student who played basketball, did not fit the characteristics mentioned by Phillips and Mathis. Interestingly, Sean Combs, Von Combs' mother, more closely matched the initial descriptions given by Phillips and Mathis than Spellman did. Sean Combs also played a crucial role in initially implicating Spellman as a suspect by informing the police that someone named India was connected to the robberies and murder. During the trial, Von Combs consistently testified in accordance to the alleged statement he had made. Also, detectives introduced a statement by India that was nearly identical on all the details that Von Combs had in his statement, except the names were switched, and India supposedly stated that Von Combs robbed Miss Phillips and shot Mr. Greavves. Furthermore, during the trial, the courts asked Shirley Phillips to identify the female in court who robbed her. She had to put on her glasses to make sure she could see. Phillips first told police that the person who robbed her was darker skinned, heavier, like 180 pounds. But oddly, Phillips testified and identified India Spellman as the robber. She said, "That girl put her gun in my face. I'll never forget those eyes." But India was only 120 pounds and was not dark skinned. Kathy Mathis identified Spellman as the female seen fleeing the scene of George Greavves' murder. However, before the trial, she contacted the prosecutors and left a message stating that she received a letter. In the message, she wanted them to be aware that she did not see the female's entire face, but only from the face up. On the day of the trial, she informed the prosecutor in the hallway outside the courtroom that once again, she had only seen the female from the nose to the forehead. Mathis recounted that the prosecutor merely mentioned that the suspect was sitting right there with her attorney. Mathis said that that was the basis for her identification of Spellman at the trial. The family found it puzzling that India was convicted of murder and robbery despite not being Muslim and having any Muslim attire. The jury was never informed of any of India's alibis, and her legal representation fell short, neglecting to investigate or present crucial evidence such as phone records that could establish her whereabouts during the murder. The 911 call reporting the Phillips robbery was made at 2:33 p.m., and the call reporting the shooting of Greavves came in at 3:48 p.m. During the times of the robberies and murder, India was on the phone with a female she was dating named Shoshana Christmas at around 3:33 according to phone records. Shoshana said she communicated with India often because that was her girlfriend. India was talking to her during the times of the murder and robbery. She said the last time India spoke to her on August 18th, India was at home. She said India was always in the house on the computer on Facebook. What was more odd, Shoshana said no one tried to contact her, not even India's legal representation, in regards to being on the phone with India at 3:33 p.m. on August 18th of 2010. India's grandfather, a retired Philadelphia police officer, was not called to the stand to testify about India's whereabouts on August 18th. Now, while he did testify, it was regarding India being detained at his house and the actions of the police there. Surprisingly, no questions were asked about her being at home during the time of the murder and robbery. He mentioned that he didn't even get a chance to speak during the trial as he was kept isolated, assuming he was going to testify. Unfortunately, he never testified as a witness to India being at home during the time of the robbery and murder. India's father said he went to court to testify, but the lawyer never asked him about the day of the murder. He never had the opportunity to state that she was unquestionably at home between the hours of 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Furthermore, the depicted characteristics of the supposed female perpetrator did not align with India's description. Moreover, the store clerk who claimed to have witnessed the suspects on the day of Shirley Phillips' robbery and George Greavves' murder failed to identify Spellman as one of the perpetrators. He informed the police that he had observed the two individuals in his store on the day of the incidents, but was unable to attend the initial lineup due to health issues. Later, he informed the detectives that he had seen photographs of Spellman and Combs on the news. Recognizing Von Combs as the person who entered his store, notably, he did not assert recognition of India Spellman. In 2022, revelations of assault, abuse, and misconduct surfaced regarding Detective James Pitts, the investigator in the India Spellman case. His involvement in numerous exonerated homicides brought to light a history of perjurious tactics.
The homicide detective is facing criminal charges. As Carrie Corrado reports, he's accused of using violent interrogation tactics and lying about it.
A former Philadelphia police detective arrested and facing perjury charges. Investigators say Detective James Pitt's misconduct led to a wrongful murder conviction of Obina Onya. Onya was convicted in the 2010 shooting death of William Glatz, who was the owner of a jewelry store in the Northeast. Back in May of 2021, Onya's murder conviction was vacated. He was exonerated after evidence proved he was too tall to be the shooter. This after he spent 11 years in jail.
Onya was convicted primarily on the testimony of confession that we now know to be false that he gave to Detective Pitts.
Onya told investigators that Pitts physically pressured him to confess and then lied about it in court. He says his statement was fueled by Pitts' violent interrogation tactics. Assistant District Attorney Michael Garmisa outlines those claims.
Punching with a closed fist, poking, or how Mr. Onya described it as doinking him in the chest and grabbing him by the neck and forcing his head down between his legs.
Pitts joined the Philadelphia Police Department in 1996.
Pitts had a disturbing track record, including 11 citizens' complaints, 5 internal investigations, 2 allegations of intimate partner violence, and 6 lawsuits that were settled for a total of $1 million. On March 3rd of 2022, James Pitts, no longer a part of the police force, faced arrest and charges. Sean Combs, Von Combs' mother, played a role in India being viewed as a suspect by suggesting to the police that India was involved. Ironically, Sean Combs bore a stronger resemblance to the initial descriptions provided by Shirley Phillips and Kathy Mathis than India Spellman did. Von Combs' mother, a Muslim who wore a headscarf, had a fuller figure and a darker skin tone. It gets even more peculiar when the police asked Sean Combs to identify India by showing her a picture. She pointed to a different person named India who was already familiar to law enforcement. The police later stated that they did not place much emphasis on this information. Additionally, Sean Combs has a 2007 conviction for providing false reports to law enforcement. But justice for India did not end with her conviction. She would appeal her case for 12 long, devastating years. On April 14th of 2022, Von Combs recounted his confession during an interview. Combs acknowledged that he provided false information incriminating Spellman. He said the detectives told him he wouldn't go home for 20 years and that whoever gave the detectives the story first would go home. Combs said that the detectives fed him the facts of the murder while they were interrogating him and kept telling him falsely that Spellman was blaming him for the crime. In November of 2022, at a hearing, Combs testified that his statement was false and based on information fed to him by Detective Pitts and other detectives. He also confirmed that 2 days after he was arrested, he wrote a letter to Spellman apologizing for his false statement. On February 3rd of 2023, a post-hearing was filed urging the court to vacate Spellman's conviction. On February 9th of 2023, 29-year-old India Spellman walked out of the Philadelphia courtroom a free woman. She spent over 12 years in prison before being exonerated of the murder of George Greavves and the robbery of Shirley Phillips. India Spellman was released after Judge Scott DeClaudio overturned her 2013 murder conviction. Her wrongful conviction stemmed from the falsified testimony of a 14-year-old, unreliable witnesses, police misconduct and abuse, and the lack of an ill-prepared trial attorney. A statement written by Myrtle Ryan, the closest surviving relative of George Greavves, said she was convinced that India did not murder Greavves, and she was greatly saddened that India had become another victim of this incident through no fault of her own. On August 28th of 2023, Spellman filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Philadelphia and several officers involved in her wrongful conviction. The killer of George Greavves was never apprehended.